couple of just introductory announcements. So hopefully everyone's well. The first introductory announcement is the plan. So the plan is to finish chapter 10 today, and I think also finish chapter 11. And if we do both of these things today, which I think we can, next week we have a class, same time, same place. And next week's class is going to be devoted to chapter 12, which is remedies. And that'll take either half the class or a little less than half the class. And the rest of next week's class is going to be final exam review. So final exam review means you get to ask me any questions about anything, including substantive questions. So we'll devote our time to that. And I do have an update on the final exam and how it's going to work. I just got it before class, so I haven't posted it yet, but I will post it for this class and the next class either later today or tomorrow morning. Basically, the final exam, the way the final exam is going to work is everything I've been saying up until now, with a couple of twists. So it's going to take place at exactly the same time, April 16th, 8 a.m. It will be a 3-hour exam. It will be worth 55% of your final mark. It will cover the chapters that it's supposed to cover. Chapters 7 to 12, and then the chapter on business organizations. You will type the answers in. There's not going to be an option to write. You're going to type the answers directly into D2L. It will be delivered by D2L. I'll give you all the instructions on how to get there, etc. And you'll type the answers in. If you have an accommodation that you've already filed, gives you more time, then you will have more time to complete the exam according to that accommodation. And the one kind of twist on it, which I gather other profs are doing too, and this is a common exam, so everybody's going to be doing the same exam. Everybody from Law 122 is going to be doing the same exam. The one difference is you're not going to be able to go backwards on the exam. So what that means is once you're done with the question and you move on to the next one, you cannot go back. So in terms of time management, in terms of gaming it out, et cetera, you have to be careful. Because once you press next, you can't go back. So I'm going to put all of that into an email. And I will, obviously if you have any big questions now, I can answer them. But I will also devote, quite a bit of time to this in the final exam review next week. Is that good? At least for now? Okay. Yes, the final will be on D2L. You will access it on D2L. You will answer the questions on D2L, and it will be submitted via D2L. So I will send the email instructions because I literally got them a second before this class. So you'll see, but that's the basic idea. So it's not by email. You get it on D2L, you answer on D2L, and submit it on D2L. The basic format of the questions is going to be the same as the midterm, and true or false with please explain. Big picture, you're going to get 18 questions. Big picture, each question will be worth 3 marks. Big picture, the true or false will be worth 1 mark, and the please explain will be worth 2 marks. So that equals 3. 3 per question is 18. 18 times 3 is 54. There might be one question that's worth 4 marks, but that's the basic idea. Okay? Any more kind of questions around that? Because I know there's a lot of interest and energy around the final, and I completely get it. And people have been working hard to make it work. The complicating feature is the fact that it's a common final exam. So, everybody has to either be on board. In some cases, we try to all agree, and if we don't, the course coordinator and the department decides. And that's what we do. Okay? Are we okay to proceed? Okay. Mesbah, that's a good question. I don't have a good answer for you. You need to be, 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 you need with a computer that has a strong internet connection, because I don't know how it's going to work if you lose connection. Can you re-log in or not? I have no idea. If you have a question like that, please send me an email. So what I can do is collect the questions and send it to the course coordinator to see what they say. I don't know what's going to happen. So Mesbah, your question, put it in an email, send it to me, and I will collect people's questions like that and try to get you answers. Okay? So for example, I already got a question from a student. Can you write the exam by hand instead of typing? The answer is no. You have to type. So questions like that, as we get them, I'll try to answer them, okay? Yash, most of the questions will not have A, B, C, and D. So it's 18 questions. Each question is true or false. Each question will have a please explain component. Okay? Again, I'm going to go through all of that next week in more detail. Okay. Any questions on the material? Any questions on what we covered last week regarding defects, contractual defects? So as you may remember, we've been talking about contractual defects. We've said that there's a few contractual defects. One of them is incapacity to contract. Incapacity to contract falls within minors, intoxication, and people who have mental capacity issues. The next type of defect is before that we did misrepresentation. Innocent misrepresentation, negligent misrepresentation, fraudulent misrepresentation, and then we started unfairness. And so one of the unfairness during bargaining. And when we talked about unfairness during bargaining, we spent a lot of time on duress. So we talked about duress of person, duress of goods, and also economic duress. So that's what we did last week. And now we're going to talk about two other kinds of unfairness during bargaining. And the two other kinds of unfairness during bargaining we're going to talk about is undue influence and unconscionability. So duress dealt with an issue around the creation of the contract, a gun to a head, something like that. That's an issue that deals with when the contract was created, there was a problem. The other two issues are different. Undue influence deals with a problem exists because of the relationship of the parties. And I'll explain. Unconscionability, which is another case of unfairness during bargaining, is when the agreement itself is so crazy, so far out there, that there's a problem with it. So those are the other two unfairness during bargaining issues we're going to deal with. Okay? Sorry, so I'm getting questions on the exam. I think, Sophia, to answer your question, will you get extra time? I think you might get an extra 15 minutes to make sure that everything is properly uploaded and to deal with the fact that you cannot go backwards. So I think 3 hours is going to mean 3 hours and 15, but wait until you get my email, okay? Because nothing is final until you'll get that email. Tuhang, I don't know what you're asking. How can I find the slide you have on the screen right now? I'm hoping everybody else sees the slides. Do you guys not see the slides? Sometimes I move back and forth so I can see the chat, but you should be able to see the slide. Unless you're just on audio. It's chapter 10, it's undue influence. Okay. All right. So what is undue influence? So undue influence is different than duress. Undue duress was a problem that occurred when the contract was formed. Undue influence is a problem that exists because of the relationship of the parties. And the whole idea behind undue influence is if you do a contract with someone, maybe because of a pre-existing relationship, there might be a problem with the contract. Because the pre-existing relationship might mean that that person was able to somehow dominate your will, or through manipulation or coercion, get you to do something that wasn't fair. So that's what we're dealing with. So we're dealing with a situation that arises because of the relationship, and in particular, the power imbalance of the relationship. That's what we're dealing with. So when we talk about undue influence, what we're really talking about is overpowering someone's will, overpowering someone's ability to say yes or no to something or to agree to certain terms. Okay? So that's different than duress. Duress is external threat of harm. That's not this. What this is basically manipulating deliberately or not deliberately, inadvertently, someone. Okay? And whether you know that you're doing it or not is not a defense. Okay? So that's the basic idea behind undue influence is you are basically controlling what someone is doing, controlling their will. So how do you know if this is a case of undue influence? How do you know if there is undue influence? Well, the way that you know if there's undue influence is whether or not there is the rules that vary. And the rules vary on whether or not there is a pre-existing fiduciary relationship. Pre-existing fiduciary relationship. Now, tell me no if you haven't. Has anybody heard the expression fiduciary relationship before? Yes? No? Maybe? No. Okay. So let me give you an example, and if someone wants to speak through this example, they can. So, if you have a lawyer, or if you have a real estate agent, who does a lawyer or real estate agent have to act on behalf of? You or them? You. So, for example, if you have a real estate agent and you have a certain budget for a house, and the real estate agent tries to convince you to buy a more expensive house, or tries to convince you to buy a house for more money than it's worth, because they will get a better commission, are they allowed to do that? Yes or no? No. And the reason they're not allowed to do that is because you have a fiduciary relationship with an agent. You have a fiduciary relationship with a lawyer. You have a fiduciary relationship with a doctor. You have a fiduciary relationship with your priest or your rabbi or your imam. So in those cases, that's a fiduciary relationship. And fiduciary relationship means that the relationship is one where the person has to act in your best interest, not in their best interest. Does that make sense? Do we understand generally what fiduciary means? Yes. So not every relationship is a fiduciary relationship. If you hire an insurance company, that's not a fiduciary relationship. The insurance company's job is to sell you, the most insurance that's the highest price. Okay? So a lawyer that you retain, Mohammed, has to act for your best interest. The one that works for you, the one that you retain. I'll explain more how this applies in a second. I just want you guys to understand what fiduciary means. So fiduciary is a relationship you have with someone where they normally have to act in your best interest. Okay? Okay. So, how do you know if undue influence exists? This is a very busy slide, so I'm going to try to explain it in a much easier way. How do you know if fiduciary relationship exists? So, undue influence, how do you know if undue influence exists? Undue influence exists, or is presumed to exist, if you enter into a contract with someone who is in a fiduciary relationship with you. So if, let's say you, Mohammed, you enter into a contract with your lawyer to buy your lawyer's boat. So in this case, this contract has nothing to do with the lawyer giving you legal advice. But because your lawyer is in a fiduciary relationship with you, what do you mean the slides aren't showing? Is that true for everybody? They are showing or they're not showing? Okay, they are showing. Okay, guys, I don't know why there's some of you saying yes, some of you are saying no. Okay, I move around a little bit. Sorry, I move around a little bit to look at the chat, but like I'm doing now. But that's just to look at the chat. Okay, guys. So hopefully you can see it again in 1 second. Okay. Okay, good. All right. So if you enter into a contract with, okay, I'm glad you guys understand what pin the screen means, because like you're talking something I don't even know what that means. Okay. So if you're entering into a contract with someone with whom you have a fiduciary relationship, even if the contract is not about legal services. So if a lawyer sells you his boat, the law will presume that there is undue influence. And the law will presume that you can void the contract. Why? Because the law will presume that when the lawyer says, buy my boat for $50,000, they're going to be able to get you to agree to something, even if it's not something you wanted to agree to. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Okay. So that's the presumption. Yes, I'll explain. Do you have voice? Can you talk? Are you okay to do that?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so I'm going to use you as an example. Let's say I've been your lawyer for 10 years. Okay? So as your lawyer, who do I have to act for? For me or for you?
For me.
Right, so I have to always act in your best interest. Let's say I'm selling my boat, and I say to you, Ladursa, buy my boat. And you say yes. Say yes.
Yes.
And I say, you know what, this is a great boat. Buy it for $50,000. And you're going to say yes. Why? Because I'm in a fiduciary relationship with you. You trust me. You've trusted me with all your legal problems for 10 years. Make sense?
Yeah.
So the law says if you enter into a contract with someone with whom you have a pre-existing fiduciary relationship, that there is a presumption of undue influence. And a presumption of undue influence means the presumption is you can void that contract. Does that make sense, Ladursa?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now this presumption can be rebutted. How can it be rebutted? It can be rebutted if I can show that the boat that I sold to you for $50,000 is actually worth $50,000. So if the transaction was fair, then you cannot void the contract. Why? Because the presumption has been rebutted. The other way that I can rebut the presumption is if I prove that I gave you time to get legal advice from somewhere else. Whenever a party says you're allowed to get legal advice from someone else, that contract cannot be voided. So, the way to answer the question about whether or not there is undue influence is you first check to see if there's a pre-existing fiduciary relationship. Pre-existing fiduciary relationship. If there is a pre-existing fiduciary relationship, so the ones I want you to know are agents, lawyer, client, doctor, patient, or priest, rabbi, imam, then there's a presumption that there is undue influence. But you can rebut it. How do you rebut it? By proving that the transaction was fair, or by proving that the other party had the option to get independent legal advice. Okay? If there is no undue influence, if there is no pre-existing fiduciary relationship, it will be very difficult for you to prove undue influence. It will be like economic duress. It will be very difficult for you to prove. Okay? That's what I want to teach you about undue influence. Are there any questions about that? Okay. The next defect that deals with unfairness during bargaining is an unconscionable transaction. Okay? Unconscionable transaction is a contract, it's a deal, that is so crazy far out there that it just doesn't make sense. So remember I told you when we studied consideration, you can trade, the law doesn't care about equal value for equal value. And that's true. The law does not care about equal value for equal value. That's true. However, an unconscionable transaction is one that just is crazy. So no fair-minded person would offer this, and no right-minded person would accept it. It is so crazy that it just doesn't make sense. So let me take another example. Barry, can I use you as an example this time? And if you have voice, let's put some voice on. Barry?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Barry, let's pretend that you've been in the desert for 3 weeks. Okay. So a lot of unconscionable transactions could be occurring now because of coronavirus. So let's say you've been in the desert for 3 weeks or for 3 days, and you haven't had a single thing to drink. And you see me, and I have a bottle of water, and I have the only bottle of water for 100 miles. So you're going to ask me to buy my bottle of water from me. Ask me to buy my bottle of water from me.
Hey, can I buy a bottle of water from you?
Sure. I hear, Barry, I Googled you, and I hear that you have a beautiful mansion in Rosedale, downtown Toronto. It's worth $3 million. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, guess what? I will sell you this bottle of water for your home in Rosedale. What are you going to say, Barry?
I would say yes.
What?
I would say yes.
You will say yes.
Yeah.
But would any fair-minded person offer this? No.
No.
Would any right-minded person accept it? No.
No.
Okay? So that's the point. So in this case, you probably would be able to void the contract. Why? Because it's unconscionable. So unconscionable is more than not equal value. Unconscionable means you had no proper regard to the future. Barry, when you entered into this contract to sell me your house for a bottle of water, were you thinking about the future?
I had to think about the future, but I didn't actually.
You didn't think about your future. Were you thinking about your family, your wife, and your kids, and your dog, who I'm going to kick out to the street now?
Yeah.
No. Were you thinking about the fact that all your life savings were poured into this house? No.
No.
Was our bargaining power equal at the time, or was it very unequal?
Very unequal.
So that's an unconscionable transaction. Okay?
Yes.
Again, it's not just, it's more than unreasonable, Adersa, be careful. Unconscionable is beyond unreasonable. If you sell me your Pascal Siakam autographed jersey for $50 last year because you didn't know he was going to be a superstar, but I knew he was going to be a superstar, and it's now worth $1,000, that might be unreasonable, but that's okay. You just made a bad deal. Unconscionable is more than unreasonable. It's more than a bad deal. It's you're abusing of the inequality of the bargaining power, and you're doing a deal that's so crazy out there that clearly the person who did the deal wasn't thinking about the future. Okay? Okay? Yeah, you sold your signed jersey to Yash. That's not unconscionable, Matthew. You're still stuck. Plus, if I remember correctly, you were drunk at the time that you sold it. That's a whole different defect. Let me give you an example of unconscionable transaction, okay? So, this example, which is from your textbook, yeah, I know, don't drink. Or don't drink to excess. This example is Mr. Beach has been injured in a car accident. He hasn't spoken to a lawyer. He hasn't spoken to his own doctor. he doesn't, he hasn't spoken to his own insurance agent. He's missed several weeks of work, but he doesn't know how ill he is, and he doesn't really know what's wrong with him. He's at home, and the insurance adjuster, Mr. Payat, drops by without warning. Now, does anybody know what an insurance adjuster is? Who does an insurance adjuster work for? For you or for the insurance company? The company. And the insurance adjuster's job is not your fiduciary. They're not looking out for you. They want to settle this case at the lowest amount possible for the insurance company. Okay, so they're not your fiduciary. So he comes to their house, and he knows that Mr. Beach maybe has limited education, maybe English isn't his first language, and he also knows that he was trusted by Mr. Beach. So you know what Payat does, you know what the insurance adjuster does, is he decides to take advantage of the situation. And he says to Beach, you know what, pay $500, and I'll give it to you right now, I'll write a check, and you'll sign this agreement that says you have no more claim against the insurance company. So Beach doesn't know any better. He doesn't realize that his injuries are really a lot worse than they are. And he signs and he agrees to $500. So now he later realizes that his injuries are very serious and he made a bad deal. He tries to get out of this deal. So what argument would Mr. Beach use to get out of this deal? Does someone want to try this? You can use voice if it's easier. I realize typing can take a while sometimes. If you're Mr. Beach, what argument are you going to use to try to get out of this contract you signed with the insurance adjuster? Does anybody want to try it on the phone, on the voice? Or by typing it? Yes? No? No? No responses? Okay. Yeah, it's an unconscionable transaction. The reason, Mohammed, it's an unconscionable transaction is because they took advantage of a situation. They dropped in on him. They realized maybe, English wasn't his first language. They realized he didn't know how bad the claim was. They showed up unexpectedly. And they got him to basically sign away hundreds of thousands of medical claims for $500. Okay? So that's an unconscionable transaction. It's a defect, and the defect is one of the unfairness during bargaining defects, and it allows, in this case, it would allow Beach to get out of his contract. Okay? And Yash, it's more than not in his favor. The deal that Matthew did with you last week was not in his favor, but it's more than that. You need more than that to get out of a contract. Okay? So that's unconscionable transaction. Any questions on that? Okay. The last contractual defect is illegality. So, Arkan, do you have voice? Yes?
Yeah.
Good. Arkan, I am going to, not for real, okay? I'm going to hire you and pay you $10,000 to go smash up Yash's car.
Okay.
I'm going to pay you $5,000 now and $5,000 when you finish the job. Agreed?
Agreed.
Good. You go home, you think about it, and you go, that's crazy. I'm not going to do that. That's against the law. So you call me up and you say, I'm not going to smash up his car. Mm-hmm. And I go, but wait a minute. We have a contract. You signed it. You said you were going to smash up his car. I even paid you. Mm-hmm. Can I sue you for breach of contract? Yes or no?
No.
Why not? We have a contract.
It's illegal?
Because it's illegal. So this defect is illegality. And illegality is if you enter into a contract that is against the law, that contract is void. So you probably know that there is a maximum rate of interest under the law. Banks and credit cards are not allowed to charge you more than 29% annual interest. So if you enter into a contract with someone and you sign and you say, I will pay you 40% interest, but that person collect 40% interest, Arkham, yes or no?
No.
Why? Because of illegality.
Illegality, yeah.
Okay? So that's illegality. So these are easy cases. Okay? The one case that is maybe a little harder about illegality is called restraint of trade. And restraint of trade is an issue of public policy. Okay? And basically, restraint of trade is, let's say, Arkham, you're working for me. And I hire you to work for me. And in my employment contract, I say, if you leave, if I fire you or you resign, you're not allowed to work for any other company anywhere in the world for 10 years. And you agree. You sign it. You say, I agree.
Okay.
Okay?
I agree.
So you agree. And let's say 6 months from now, I say, I don't have room for you anymore and I let you go. You want to work for a company in Dubai. Do you think that this clause is valid or not valid?
Should be not valid, hopefully.
Why not? Why not? You're right, but why not?
Because
it's illegal.
Right.
I will answer my own question. Because of restraint of trade. So the law says, even if you agree to something, if you agree not to compete with someone, and you agree to it, you sign it, that clause is not valid unless it's reasonable. Even if you agree in this particular case of non-compete, this clause is not valid unless it's reasonable. So what does reasonable mean? Reasonable means that the amount of time is reasonable and the geography is reasonable. So if instead of saying to you, Arkham, you're not allowed to work anywhere in the world for 10 years, I say to you, you're not allowed to work anywhere in the GTA for 6 months. Do you think that that is legal or not legal?
That is legal.
It is. Why? Because the limit is low and the geography is reasonable.
Okay.
Okay? So that's restraint of trade. The most common example of restraint of trade is non-compete clause. So people think that non-compete clauses are valid, but they're not always valid. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They're only valid if they are reasonable. Make sense?
Yes.
Good. So, Mohammed, a contract that is illegal is void. Correct. So that's what I wanted to say about illegality. And that's what I wanted to say about defects. And basically, the issue spotting for defects. So how do you know if you're dealing with a situation about defect on an exam? If people are arguing, if the question is there a contract, then what you're really dealing with is chapter 7 or 8. You're dealing with intent to create legal relations, you're dealing with meeting of the minds, or you're dealing with consideration. If you're dealing with, is there a term to this contract? What is a term to the contract? Then you're dealing with chapter 9. Implied terms, express terms, exclusion clauses, waivers, interpretation. That is chapter 9. If you have something that looks like a contract, but one party wants to get out of it, that's chapter 10. That's defects. And how do you get out of a contract? You say that there was a misrepresentation, or you prove a capacity issue, or you prove unfairness, or you prove illegality. So that's how you spot the issue on the exam. Okay? I'm not going to do these examples now because we've done a lot of examples for chapter 10. And if people want me to, when I do final exam review next week, I can go back to it. I hope that's okay, but I think that's a better use of our time. Okay? Janikin, if I pronounce your name right. Yes, exactly. If the distance and the time frame are reasonable, then it is valid. If the distance and time frame are reasonable, it is not void. Exactly. So if you're drafting this contract, Janikin, and you're the employer, are you going to make 100% sure that it's reasonable or not? Because if it's not reasonable, even if they signed it, it is not valid. Make sense? So the issue, Sophia, it's a good question. And the issue, Sophia, is not when is it reasonable, but are the terms reasonable? And the terms are reasonable based on case law. So there's a lot, I don't want to teach a whole class on this because I can literally teach a whole class on this, right? So if you are a senior executive getting paid a lot of money, it might be reasonable for someone to say, listen, if you work for Bell, you can't work for Rogers for a year, right? That could be reasonable. But if you're just starting out and this is your first job, it probably is not reasonable for them to say you can't work for a competitor for a year. So the short answer, Sophia, it's a really good question, is it depends on the circumstances. But basically you're looking for the lowest amount of time and the lowest geography that is reasonable in the circumstances. Okay, Sophia? Okay. Any other questions on defects? Okay. No offense to my Monday class, but you guys are still my favorite by far. Favorite Thursday online class. There is not even close. Not even close. My favorite Thursday online class. You guys are crushing it. Okay. So, the next subject I want to do is discharging a contract. So if you just take a step back and you kind of think about, okay, so what are we learning in chapter 7? Yeah, you say this every week, dude. But still, think about it. Okay, so when you look at the scheme, when you look at the arc, what are we doing? Chapter 7 and 8 is, do we have a contract? Chapter 9 is, what are the terms of the contract? Chapter 10 is, okay, we have something that looks like a contract, but there's a problem. So can one party get out of it? Chapter 11 is discharge. And discharge basically means, when can one party say, I no longer have any obligations under a contract? So discharge basically means a party no longer has any obligations under a contract. Okay? So, Sophia, if you and I have an agreement, and you have to, under this agreement, have to deliver 10,000 yoga pants, orange, to my warehouse, and I have to pay you $100,000, just based on what you know so far, if you actually deliver 10,000 yoga pants, orange, to my warehouse, do you have any further obligations under this contract? Yes or no? No. So the way the law calls this, discharged. You are discharged from your obligations. You are discharged from the contract. If I pay you $100,000, am I discharged from my obligations under the contract? Yes or no? If I pay you $100,000. Yes. So that's what discharge means. Okay? So part of discharge is easy. Part of discharge is complicated. So we're going to do 4 examples of discharge. The first example is discharging your obligations under a contract by performing it, by performance. The second example is by agreement. The third example is because of someone else's breach. And the last example is by operation of law, called frustration. So those are the 4 types of discharge we're going to do. But generally speaking, discharge, and this is what people get tripped up on. So sometimes on a final exam, a student will get tripped up on a discharge question because they forget what discharge means. So discharge means, do I still have any additional obligations under the contract? Has the contract come to an end for me? That's what discharge means. So you need to kind of make sure you understand that. Okay, and get your head around it, because that's the hardest part. So we dealt with other ways that contracts come to an end. When we studied misrepresentation, we said that the party that is the victim of misrepresentation can rescind the contract. They can use the remedy of rescission to say this contract never existed. So that's one way to end the contract. Another way to end the contract is if there's a defect and you say this contract is void. You go to the court and you say this contract's void. So those are different ways to deal with bringing a contract to an end. But the most common way to bring a contract to an end, the most common way to bring a contract to an end is through discharge. And basically, discharge means the parties do not need to do or perform anything more under the contract. That is what discharge means. Okay? If, Sophia, to take the example of before, we have a contract for you to deliver 10,000 yoga pants on June 1st to my warehouse, and I'm supposed to pay you $100,000 on June 1st. If you haven't delivered yoga pants today, April 2nd, have you discharged your contract? No. And if I have not paid you $100,000, have I discharged my contract? No. So what does that mean? That means that we still have an obligation to perform. In this case, there is a pending legal obligation. What is the pending legal obligation? For you to deliver the yoga pants and for me to pay you. So discharge is when nobody has to do anything else. Okay? Or when one party doesn't have to do anything else. Because it could be discharged for both, or it could be just discharged for one. Okay? So that's discharge. Again, how can you spot a discharge issue in an exam? The way that you can spot a discharge issue on an exam is when the question either will say, is so-and-so discharged? So that's a pretty good hint that it deals with discharge. Or when you say, does this person have any remaining obligations under the contract? That means it's a discharge question. Okay? So even though discharge and defect sound the same, they're not. A defect is a problem with the contract itself. It was entered into by a minor or someone that was drunk or under duress or because of undue influence or whatever. So that's defect, or there was a misrepresentation. That's defect. Discharge, the contract is already going and something happens. Or someone breaches their obligation. And in those cases, there might be a problem with discharge. Okay? So don't get confused between defect and discharge. Spotting the issue is a big part of what, you should be doing on a final exam. So in this case, you're not dealing with whether there was a problem with how or when the contract was formed. You're dealing with the contract is alive and going forward, but something has happened. And can that something cause one person to say, I no longer have any further obligations? Okay? So an easy example, Sophia, is if on June 1st you don't deliver to me the yoga pants, and let's say you never deliver them to me, okay? Do you think I have an obligation to pay you the $100,000? If you never deliver them to me? No. So the way that we say this under the law is I am discharged from my obligation to pay you. Why? In this case, because of your breach. Okay? So there's different ways you can be discharged. One way is by performance, the most common way. The other way is both parties agree, and I'll talk about that. The third way is one party is in breach. I'll talk about that. And the fourth way is by operation of law, and that is known as the doctrine of frustration. So I'm going to do all four in today's class. Does this make sense generally? I'm going to do performance before the break, and I'm going to do all three after the break. But do we understand generally what discharge means? Okay, good. So, okay, thank you guys. The first example of discharge is performance. Okay? So discharge by performance is the most common form of discharge. And what that means is the first example I gave was Sophia. She delivered the pants that she was supposed to deliver. She delivered them. I paid her. We are discharged. Why are we discharged? Because we completed all of our obligations under the contract. We fulfilled our obligations under the contract. If I do what I'm supposed to do under the contract's over. As far as I'm concerned, I am discharged. This is easy. This makes sense, right? You just have to get used to the terminology of discharge, but this makes sense, okay? As a general rule, and there will be exceptions, okay? So there will be exceptions to this general rule. A contract has to be performed exactly as required, as a general rule. If you don't perform the contract exactly as it is required, you are in breach. So to take an example, Sophia, and instead of delivering to me 10,000 yoga pants, you deliver to me 1,000 yoga pants. Are you in breach of your contract? Yes or no? Yes. Why? Because you did not fulfill all of your obligations under the contract. Right? So, as a general rule, you have to do everything in the contract exactly as required, otherwise there's a breach. That is the general rule. Okay? So now, I'm going to give you two exceptions, and people sometimes, trip over this. There's two exceptions. The first exception is time of performance. The second exception is tender of performance. So I'm going to do both. Time of performance, tender of performance. Okay? Sophia, can I continue to use you for this example, yes or no? Okay. Are you comfortable using voice? If you're not, it's okay. I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. It's just easier if you are.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. So now, let's make this let's take a little twist on this contract. You still have to deliver to me 10,000 yoga pants, orange, and you have to deliver them by June 1st. Agreed?
Yep.
Okay. So now, that's what our contract says. And now, you don't deliver them on June 1st. You deliver them on June 15th. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So remember I told you the general rule is that you have to perform the contract exactly as required. So, are you in breach of your contract, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. However, here's the tricky part. If you deliver them 2 weeks late, June 15th, can you say that you have discharged your contract? Which means that I'm now obliged to pay you. Don't answer because it's tricky.
Okay.
The law answer is yes. So the rule for time of performance is that even if there's a specific date in the contract, and in this case the date was June 1st, even if there's a specific date and you are late, you can discharge your contract. And if you discharge your contract, it means I still have to pay you. So, Sophia, let's walk this through. You and I, on April 2nd, enter into an agreement. The agreement is you will deliver to me 10,000 yoga pants at my warehouse on June 1st, and they will be orange. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. June 1st, you don't show up. You show up June 15th. So now show up to my warehouse.
Hi,
Are you in my warehouse?
I'm at your warehouse.
Hi.
Hi.
Are you the person who was supposed to deliver the yoga pants on June 1st?
Yes.
Well, did you know that today's June 15th?
Yes.
So, under these, are they orange? Exactly what I asked for? Yes. So, in these circumstances, am I allowed to say to you, I will refuse delivery? Anybody can answer. It doesn't have to just be Sophia. Under these circumstances, am I allowed to refuse delivery? This is where it gets tricky. The answer is no. And the answer is no because time is usually not of the essence. Someone say that. Sophia, say it for the whole class. time is usually not of the essence.
Time is usually not of the essence.
Correct. So even though you're late, I have to accept them. I can sue you for damages because you breached your contract. So if I was late getting the yoga pants to my store, if I lost sales revenue, I can sue you for that. Okay? So I can sue you for that. But as a general rule, time is usually not of the essence. Okay? Say it again, Sophia.
Time is usually not of the essence.
Good. So one of the reasons you're my favorite Thursday class, online virtual Thursday class, is because you get questions like Yash. So thank you for your question, Yash. Yash is worried because he's saying, wait a minute, if you don't deliver to me the yoga pants by June 1st, I'm going to lose all my business. I'm actually trying to sell everything on June 2nd. So if you don't deliver them by June 1st, this is a crazy contract. I hate this principle of time is usually not of the essence. It's stupid, and I don't want it to apply to our contract. Can you do something about this, Yash? What do you think? Yes or no? Forget about suing. I'm still at the contract stage. Yash, when you enter into a contract, or when I enter into this contract with Sophia, can I do something in my contract to change this rule? Well, I'm glad you don't know what. You know why I'm glad you don't know what? So I can teach it to you. If you knew what would be the purpose of coming here? So, Sophia, give me a virtual high five, and you too, Yash, you guys are on top of it. Go. Okay? High five. Beautiful. So now, I'm going to pretend I'm Yash, someone who actually is paying attention to Law 122 and trying to use it for their benefit. So, Sophia, we're entering into a contract on April 2nd. And my contract says, I want you to deliver green yoga pants, 10,000 to my warehouse at this location on June 1st. Agreed?
Agreed.
$100,000. Agreed?
Agreed.
Good. But I hate this rule that says time is usually not of the essence. So you know what words I'm going to write in the contract? I'm going to write the following word, which Yash is going to write down for all of us to see. He's going to write down this clause, which is a boilerplate clause, and this clause will say, start typing, oh my God, Yash, you get another high five. This clause says, time is of the essence. These are the magic words. Yash, type it again for everybody to see. This is like beautiful. This is music to my ears. Time is of the essence. So if you say those magic words, Sophia, and now you're trying to deliver on June 15th, what can I say now? Try to deliver these yoga pants on June 15th.
Hi, I'm here to deliver your yoga pants.
Yeah, I think I know you. Weren't you the person who was supposed to deliver them on June 1st?
Yes.
You're late by
Yes.
15 days. Well, take a look at this contract, which I have with me, and read clause 12. What is the title of clause 12, do you think?
Time is of the essence.
Yeah, and it says that for purposes of delivery on June 1st, time is of the essence. So if you use those magic words, then you are not discharged if you deliver late. So, Rafi, a good question. Is time of the essence implied or not implied? What is implied? Is what's implied that time is not of the essence, or is what's implied that time is of the essence? Rafi. The default rule is that time is not of the essence. The default rule is time is not of the essence. So what do you need to do, Sophia and Yash, what do you need to do to make time of the essence?
You need a specific clause.
to say it. And this clause is called time of the essence. And this clause is normally a boilerplate clause. So if you remember, when I did contractual terms, the end of chapter 9, I said we're going to cover a bunch of boilerplate clauses. This is a boilerplate clause, and this boilerplate clause is time is of the essence. Okay? So the general rule is you can deliver late, as long as it's reasonable late, not 10 years later. And the other person has to accept, but they can sue you for a breach, unless you say time is of the essence. Okay? I don't know if I pronounce it Semi or Sim, or I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, so I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Semi, I'm going to deal with the example of not delivering the right item after the break. Okay? So for now, let's just deal with time and assume it's the right item. Is that okay? Okay. So it's not that the contract is void, Mohammed. If the contract says you must deliver it by June 1st, and it also says time is of the essence, then when she tries to deliver late, the contract is not void. The contract is valid. But it means that she did not discharge her obligations. And so, as we'll see after the break, if she does not discharge her obligations, do I have to pay you, Safia?
No.
No, even though you delivered 10,000 yoga pants. If she doesn't say time is of the essence, and she delivers to me 10,000 yoga pants on June 15th, I have to pay her because she discharged her contract. But I can sue her for damages because I didn't make as many sales as I thought. So that's what it means. It means in one case you're discharged even though you're late. And if you're discharged, I have to pay you. In the other case, it means you are not discharged. Why? Because I'm refusing delivery and I am allowed to refuse delivery. What makes it that I am allowed to refuse delivery? Yash, say it again. What clause are you putting into the contract that says I'm allowed to refuse delivery if you're late? Time is of the essence. No, Michael, you don't get the yoga pants. The whole point is you refuse to accept the yoga pants. Okay? If you accept the yoga pants, then it's like if time was not of the essence. You can sue for them being late. Okay, Michael? No, I want to make sure you get it. It's a good question. But you can't get both. You can't get the yoga pants for free. You're basically refusing the yoga pants. So, if she doesn't say, I know, thanks, Michael. If she doesn't say time is of the essence, Jessica, she has to accept the yoga pants, and she can sue because, and I can sue because she was 2 weeks late. I will sue for damages. So what damages do I suffer in the 2 weeks? I lost sales revenue for 2 weeks. But I have to accept them. Does that make sense, Jessica? Okay, good. So that's the first special issue that we deal with performance, and that was called time of performance. Okay, that's the first issue we deal with when we're dealing with performance. The second issue we deal with when we deal with performance is called tender of performance. Sophia, can I still continue to use this example with you?
Yes.
Okay. So, tender of performance is different. So, let's say we have the same contract, okay? You have to deliver 10,000 yoga pants June 1st at my warehouse, Orange, for $100,000. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. What if you deliver 9,999? Are you in breach? Yes or no?
Yes.
What? You're right, but you're hesitating. Remember, when Freddie or Kyle take the threes, they don't hesitate. They take the threes and they walk backwards. They know that ball's going in. So why are you in breach? If you deliver 9,999, why are you in breach?
Because the contract wasn't fulfilled exactly to its specifications.
Wow. It's like I highlighted it. Beautiful. Well done. Okay. So now the question is, have you discharged your contract? And here's where it gets tricky. Okay. So even though the general rule is that you have to do exactly what the contract says, there's an exception to this rule. And this exception to this rule is if the contract is substantially performed. So substantially performed means you do almost all of it. So substantially is more than 50%. There's not really a percentage, but it's almost all. So when you think of substantial, think of almost all. So Sophia, in my example, delivering on June 1st, 9,999 orange yoga pants, is that substantially performed? And not just Sophia, everybody.
Yes.
Yes. Okay? If you delivered 4 yoga pants, is that substantially performed?
No.
No. So if you show up with 9,999 yoga pants, you have discharged your contract. I have to accept it. Now, I can sue you for the 1 yoga pants and not pay you for that 1 yoga pants. But I cannot say to you, go back to your factory, I will not accept any of them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Okay? Yash, you're just trying to collect the high fives today, aren't you? I'm going to give it to you again, buddy. Give me another high five, because you're earning them. Give me another high five. There we go. You are crushing it today. You are completely crushing it. You're on your game. So, but I'm not there yet, so bear with me. So, the general rule is you have to do everything exactly as performed. The exception to the rule is substantial performed. So now, come to my warehouse, Sophia, and tell me that you only have 999 yoga pants.
Hi, I'm at your warehouse and I only have 999,000.
9,999
Yeah.
yoga pants. And if I say to you, go back, I'm not accepting them, is that a valid argument?
No,
Why? What are you going to say?
because the contract has been substantially performed.
Correct. So that means that you are now, say it, you are now what?
Discharged from the contract.
Beautiful. You are now discharged from the contract. Exactly. Mohammed, I'm giving you another high five. I'm giving you a high five too. Congrats. So now, let's say Yash and Mohammed are whispering in my ear. They're saying, dude, don't let her get away with it. You asked for 10,000, you should get 10,000. I go, yeah, can I do that? Does the law allow me to do that? They go, yeah, man, pay attention to Law 122 and you'll know how. So I study Law 122, and now I negotiate a new contract with you, Sophia. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, Sophia, I want 10,000 yoga pants on June 1st.
Okay.
Okay, but I want 10,000. I don't want any of this monkey business where you just show up with 9,903 or 9,992 and we argue about substantial performance. I want 10,000. So you know what I'm going to write in my contract? And you're going to agree to it? I'm going to write the magic words. What are the magic words, Mohammed? What kind of clause, Mohammed, am I going to write? I'm going to write a clause that's called entire contracts. So I'm going to say you are not going to discharge this contract unless and until everything is done. So now, show up at my warehouse, Sophia, with only 9,998 yoga pants.
Hi, I'm at your warehouse with 999,998 yoga
You're having
pants.
trouble with the numbers, 9,998. So I say, really? What did our contract say? That or 10,000?
10,000.
So guess what? I have clause 13 of this contract, which, yes, Savannah, is also a boilerplate clause. And you know what this contract says? Guess what this contract says, Sophia?
That I have to fulfill the whole thing.
Yeah, and what's that clause called, this boilerplate clause? I wonder. What
It's
is it?
called entire contracts.
Yes. So that means that you are not discharged unless and until you do what?
Fulfill the entire contract. Or
Exactly.
fulfill all obligations.
So that's the exception to the exception. So the general rule is everything exactly as is. The exception is substantially performed. The exception to the exception is if you write another boilerplate clause called entire contracts. Okay? So, Matthew, if you, the issue here, your question is it possible to deliver a substantial amount and promise delivery? But remember, your contract said 10,000 by June 1st. So the question is, are you discharged if you deliver substantial amount? And the answer is yes, you are discharged. You don't even have to deliver the remainder later if it's substantial, unless there's an entire contracts clause. But so you don't have to deliver the rest later. That means that the other party can sue you. If you want them not to sue you, or not to sue you for the full amount, you can say, don't worry, I'll bring it to you tomorrow. But what you're doing there is reducing your damages. Does that make sense, Matthew? Good. So Matthew, can we use you as an example now? Yes or no? So Randy, okay, so give me a second, Matthew, thank you. Randy, these are two different types of boilerplate clauses. Time is of the essence is one type of boilerplate clause, and entire contracts is another type of boilerplate clause. So can you combine them in one? Theoretically you can, but normally they're two different clauses. Boilerplate, they're found at the end of the contract. Okay, Randy? Okay. So now, the standard is, it's case law, Barry. It's a good question. It's case law. So I don't have a specific number, and it depends on the case, but it means almost all. So let me give you the example I want to give you, Barry. You'll see an example of substantial. You're going to figure, you're going to know most of the time if it's substantial. So Matthew, let's say that you are a contractor, and I hire you to build 10 houses for me in Vaughan. And I give you the specs for these houses, 3 floors, finished basement, 2-car garage, big patio, big backyard, beautiful doors, etc., etc. Are you going to enter into this contract with me, Matthew, to build these 10 houses? I'm going to pay you a total of $10 million, $1 million per house. But don't worry, I'm going to make money on it.
Of course I will.
Beautiful. So guess what? You build all the houses. They're beautiful. Everything is exactly what I asked for. But for one of the houses, the 10th house, you didn't put doorknobs on the doors to the master bedroom.
I see.
Okay? So, in this case, did you discharge your contract? Yes or no?
I believe it is substantially performed, so yes, I did.
Yeah. So, you discharge your contract. That means that if I have to pay you $1 million per house, I have to pay you $10 million less the cost of one doorknob.
Yes.
Make sense?
Yep.
Exactly. What could I have done, Matthew, to make sure that I paid you nothing until you put that stupid doorknob in?
The entire contract clause.
Correct. That's how this works. So again, Barry, this is a very easy example of what substantial performance is. But substantial means almost all. And that's the standard. There's really nothing more specific than that. The law doesn't deal in the specifics for this. It deals more in the generalities. Does that make sense? Okay. So, any questions on what we've covered up until now? So, Savannah, I answered your question. Yes, it's a boilerplate clause. Any question on that? Okay. Okay, good. So that's what I wanted to do before the break. So let's reconvene at 5:35, and then we will finish this charge then.